Musashi would have liked to have a try at working with the clay. Since boyhood, he enjoyed doing things with his hands, and he thought he might at least be able to make a simple tea bowl. Just then, however, one of the potters, an old man of nearly 60, started fashioning a tea bowl. Musashi, observing how deftly he moved his fingers and handled his spatula, realized he'd overestimated his own abilities. It takes so much technique just to make a simple piece like that, he marveled. These days, he often felt deep admiration for other people's work. He found he respected technique, art, even the ability to do simple tasks well, particularly if it was a skill he himself had not mastered. In one corner of the shop, on a makeshift counter made of an old door panel, stood rows of plates, jars, sake cups, and pitchers. They were sold as souvenirs for the paltry sum of 20-30 pieces of cash to people on their way to and from the temple. In stark contrast to the earnestness the potters devoted to their work was the humbleness of their boarded shack. Musashi wondered whether they always had enough to eat. Life, it appeared, wasn't as easy as it sometimes seemed. Contemplating the skill, concentration, and devotion put into making these wares, even as cheap as these, made Musashi feel he still had a long way to go if he was to reach the level of perfection in swordsmanship that he had aspired to. The thought was a sobering one, for in the past 3 weeks, he'd visited other well-known training centers in Kyoto besides the Yoshioka school, and had begun to wonder whether he had not been too critical of himself since his confinement in Himeji. His expectation had been to find Kyoto full of men who had mastered the martial arts. It was, after all, the imperial capital, as well as the former seat of the Ashikaga shogunate, and it had long been a gathering place for famous generals and legendary warriors. During his stay, however, he had not found a single training center that had taught him anything to be genuinely grateful for. Instead, at each school, he had experienced disappointment. Though he always won his bouts, he was unable to decide whether this was because he was good or his opponents were bad. In either case, if the samurai he had met were typical, the country was in sorry shape. Encouraged by his success, he had reached the point of taking a certain pride in his expertise. But now, reminded of the danger of vanity, he felt chastened. He mentally bowed in deep respect to the clay-smudged old man at the wheel and started up the steep slope to Kiyomuzo-dera. Yeah, so this chapter touches on respect. As he makes his way through Kyoto and a bunch of other Japanese cities, he sees the things that people do, the tradesmen, and he admires what they do out of respect for everything. Not only the humans, but nature and what it does. He stopped along the way to look at several well-known temples, and at each one he bowed and said 2 prayers. One was, "Please protect my sister from harm." The other was, "Please test the lowly Musashi with hardship. Let him become the greatest swordsman in the land, or let him die." As you can see, most people will pick the easy path. He is asking the gods to give him the hard path and to test him. I think most humans are tested throughout life. Some are tested early, some are tested late in life, but you get tested. In this chapter, ultimately, he meets up with Osugi. Osugi finds him and surrounds him with a handful of other warriors, and nobody knows the story between them two, but they all respect the elderly there in Japan. So Osugi's about 65 and Musashi's a young 20, and Osugi has convinced them all that Musashi's evil. So Osugi challenges him to a duel. She's got her sword, and Musashi can easily take her out, right? And he can take out the other warriors too with the flick of her wrist, no issues. But he decides to stand there and allow the grandmother to vent her anger, and in the end he just walks away. He still respects her as his best friend's mother, although she's bent out of shape and wants his head on a platter, but he walks away in a sign of respect for Granny. So this is a short chapter, but it does hit hard on respect and how they treated each other. So peace and be well, my friends.